When people talk about rotator cuff pain, they usually describe one of three things. Either it's that sharp pinching pain right on the outside of the shoulder when you lift up your arm, or it's a deep nagging ache in the back of the shoulder blade that just won't go away. Third option is that you just have this general bit of tension or discomfort, but what you notice the most is that you've lost your full range of motion. And that's what leads us to our patient today, Laura. She just hasn't been able to lift her arm overhead fully. It feels like she's just hitting a wall when she raises it up. So our goal today is to get that left arm moving completely free and clear, all the way up next to her ear. To fix this, we really have to dive into each one of the four muscles. The rotator cuff is made up of the Supraspinatus, the Infraspinatus, Teres Minor, and the Subscapularis. Here on this model, you can kind of see them with a little more clarity. You can see the Supraspinatus is up above. It comes along the top part of the shoulder, and it goes just in front of the spine of the scapula. And then it carries all the way over into the humerus at this attachment. Now, the infraspinatus is a big triangle. What I feel are three distinct fibers inside of the infraspinatus. We have the upper section, the middle section, and the lower section. And moving down from there, you can see the teres minor, which is a much smaller muscle, but it really seems to be one of the most painful muscles on people when they have this like dull, achy pain or tension in the back of that shoulder blade. And when this muscle gets tight, it can also really limit how far somebody can raise their arm overhead. So I'm thinking about this muscle right off the top of my head when Laura starts to talk about her symptoms and how everything got started, which we'll get into more just a little bit. And the last one to really wrap up on is the subscapularis. Now, this muscle is difficult to treat. And I only say that because it's hard to get into. It's not on the surface like the other three. Instead, you have to really get your hand pretty narrow, and then you have to just snake it through here between the scapula itself and the rib cage. And we'll see more of that in a moment when I'm working on her shoulder. So my job is to figure out which is the primary culprit, which muscle is causing the majority of the pain. And from there, I'm going to really try to figure out and dive into what's the secondary muscle. And this one usually causes some symptoms, but it's oftentimes the one that's restricting a lot of the movement as well. And from there, we have the tertiary muscles, and these are the accessory muscles. In her case, they're actually not even any one of the rotator cuff muscles, but we'll get more into that in the future. So naturally, I do start with the supraspinatus. Statistically, this is the most commonly injured muscle in the rotator cuff. So I'm in the habit of checking it first, even though I know in her case that it most likely isn't the primary culprit. But first, before I can really get into this muscle, I have to get the trap to relax, which is this superficial muscle. It's a huge muscle, and it's often misdiagnosed. So in order to get to the deeper muscles, you have to get the trap relaxed. The supraspinatus is the most commonly injured muscle in the rotator cuff. But in her case, that's not really what's going on. But as I'm working on it here, I quickly realize this isn't her main problem. Pushing on it just doesn't reproduce her exact pain. Instead, I notice a visual clue. The bottom corner of her scapula, her shoulder blade, it's winging. It's lifting up off the rib cage. That physical clue tells me there's this massive bit of tension deeper down in the lower part of her rotator cuff, specifically in the teres minor and the subscapularis. So we pivot. I move down to the teres minor, and the second I sink in, boom, she feels it immediately. It reproduces her exact symptoms. I stay right here, maintain deep, sustained pressure until I feel those fibers fully melt and relax. But even with the pain dropping, that shoulder blade is still winging a bit. To flatten it out, I have to access the subscapularis. You can see me here using a knife edge contact to slide into that tight space onto the blade. As that releases, man, that shoulder blade finally drops, flattens out, and it's against her rib cage. You can actually see her body relax the moment it happens. Next, I check the infraspinatus. It does feel really rigid, and it's very unresponsive to light pressure. This is common. It's common because we tend to lean on our elbow, and we do that for a very, very long period of time. So for most desk job people, which Laura has a desk job, they tend to lean over towards their left arm so that it frees up motion for the right hand to use the mouse. And the infraspinatus is really the muscle that's just kind of holding your weight up for those long, long hours of work. So in her case, this muscle is really tight. It's really stiff. It's really tender. And I just take my time. Since the muscle isn't very responsive, I just need to be patient and just keep my pressure there until I feel the muscle change. But since it has those 3 distinct fibers, I know, and this is going on in the back of my mind, that I have to make sure I get through each one of those fibers so that the whole muscle relaxes. Because if you don't get through all 3 fibers, then oftentimes you might just have 2 loose fibers and then the third is really tight and the symptoms just don't truly go away. But in her case, everything fully relaxed, and it actually relaxed much quicker than I thought it would. But honestly, it's because she does such a good job of staying active. She works out, she exercises. But of course, that kind of gets us into why this all started in the first place for her. So Laura really has a really cool hobby. She's into aerial yoga. So she's up in the air, she's spinning around, and she's oftentimes putting herself into these pretty uncomfortable positions. But it's a great workout, and it's developed a lot of good tone in her shoulder muscles. But that's really where the problem started. So 2 months back, she was exercising and she was doing aerial yoga, and she was in this really difficult pose. And unfortunately, her body weight shifted, and then she slipped down really fast. So she had to catch her entire body weight with her left arm. And unfortunately, her left arm was in almost full internal rotation. And so she didn't feel pop, she didn't feel tear, nothing like that. But she just felt this sudden pain, and it's lingered ever since. Now, the good news is the muscles were damaged to a point that they couldn't just recover on their own. So everything healed. But muscles have memory. And that muscle memory will keep the muscle tight and spasming sometimes. But in her case, all the muscles were still grabbing. And then if you think about it, she's going and she's working almost every single day, and she's leaning on that left shoulder. So you can kind of see why the muscles just don't ever get a chance to relax. But the good news is, by working each one of those 4 muscles, we're able to just get everything loosened up, and now our shoulder blade is moving so much better. But the treatment isn't always just done there. So we've addressed the primary and the secondary muscles. So at this point, she's feeling a lot better, but I've noticed that we're not at 100% yet. And I noticed that with a few visual cues and with my palpation, and that there seems to be still some restriction in her scapula and her shoulder blade. And so to kind of recap, we've worked on the primary symptomatic muscles and the secondary ones so far. So the primary ended up being the Teres Minor and the Subscapularis. Then the secondary muscles were the Infraspinatus and the Supraspinatus. But we still have some tertiary muscles that are tight and restricted. And they ended up being a few other muscles that attach to the scapula, namely the levator scapula, the rhomboid minor, and the rhomboid major, along with the trap. So that's where I shift my focus, and I spend the rest of my time really making sure those muscles are loosened up and that everything's cleaned up. And within just a few minutes, everything unlocked, and she's feeling really great. That's the right time to have the person come up and test it out and see. I always like to test at the end of a treatment. For me, that's so important. So that's where she gets up, she moves her arm up, and she's just amazed that her arm can go all the way up.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
Helps so much.